The morning sun glinted off the asphalt of Fort Brackett, cutting through the thin morning mist like a blade. Rows of soldiers in crisp uniforms marched in formation, their boots striking the concrete in perfect unison, a rhythm that echoed through the base like a war drum. Sergeant First Class Avery Mills jogged lightly toward the PT line, her uniform crisp, her hair pulled back neatly under her cap, but every step carried a subtle hitch. The limp was slight, barely noticeable unless someone was paying attention, but it was there, a whisper of vulnerability in her otherwise controlled gait. Colonel Whitaker stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, sun reflecting off his mirrored sunglasses. His presence was magnetic, intimidating, the kind that made the younger soldiers straighten their posture without thinking. His gaze swept the PT line and it landed on Avery with unyielding scrutiny. "Mills," he barked, voice cutting through the morning air like a rifle shot. "What's your excuse today?" The word excuse was laced with derision. He had a knack for picking up on any hint of hesitation, any deviation from the standard, and he thrived on exploiting it. Avery's chest tightened. She had prepared herself for this moment more times than she could count, yet the weight of authority, the mocking edge in his tone, gnawed at her resolve. She met his gaze evenly, refusing to let her eyes dart away. "Minor injury, sir," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Nothing that will stop PT." Whitaker took a step closer, the kind of step that made it clear he enjoyed proximity, enjoyed the tension it created. "Don't make me call you out in front of everyone," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. His shadow fell across her, long and oppressive, but Avery straightened her shoulders. She felt every soldier's eyes on her, the curious glances, the whispers, the thinly veiled judgment, but she refused to flinch. Her mind flashed back to months earlier in a desert thousands of miles away, under a sun that burned hotter than any she had ever known. She remembered the sand whipping her face, the crackle of gunfire, the screams echoing over the roar of helicopters. She remembered the explosion that had thrown her into the sand, the searing pain that had ripped through her torso, the taste of blood in her mouth, and the helplessness of watching comrades fall. She had survived. She bore the scars. And today, on this base, no one, especially not Colonel Whitaker, would dictate what strength meant. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. "You think you're excused for some story about a scrape?" His tone was cruel, mocking, designed to belittle. Avery's jaw tightened. Every fiber of her being urged restraint, but her patience was finite and her pride ran deep. "Sir," she said, voice measured, "I think it's time you see why." The PT line held its breath. Soldiers exchanged confused glances. Some leaned in slightly, sensing the tension, sensing that something unusual was about to unfold. Avery could feel the collective energy shift, the anticipation coiling like a spring ready to release. Whitaker raised an eyebrow, a smirk forming as if he already knew the punchline, already expected her to crumble. Avery stopped, planted her feet firmly, and in one fluid motion, she unbuttoned her uniform coat. The murmurs started softly at first, then swelled into a wave of disbelief. Across her chest ran a jagged scar, pale against her skin, stretching diagonally from her shoulder to her ribcage, a silent testament to a firefight no one here had ever witnessed firsthand. She had hidden it under her uniform for months, under polite smiles and casual conversations, under the assumptions of those who equated strength with speed or endurance in a morning PT test. The scar was more than skin deep. It carried the memory of heat, smoke, and explosions. It carried the weight of friends lost, of missions completed at the edge of impossibility. Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, each inhale a reminder of what she had endured. Whitaker's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of something he didn't expect. Uncertainty, disbelief, maybe even fear. He was accustomed to authority on a uniform, power in tone and posture, but he wasn't prepared for history written in flesh. The soldiers around her shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered softly, their voices carrying awe, their eyes widening. The base seemed to hold its collective breath, every movement frozen as if time itself paused to witness this revelation. Avery's voice cut through the tension, low but unwavering. "This," she said, touching the scar lightly with a fingertip, "is why I can't run today." Whitaker's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried to gather the control he thrived on, but the words caught in his throat. The commanding presence he had wielded for years suddenly felt tenuous, fragile in the face of a story he had no frame of reference for. He had judged her, assumed weakness, measured strength by superficial standards, and now that assumption threatened to crumble. Avery took a slow step back, letting the coat hang open, letting the scar speak louder than words ever could. She could feel the gaze of every soldier, the respect creeping in, tentative at first, then swelling. The whispers became a hum, a collective acknowledgement of bravery and survival. Whitaker shifted, the sound of his boots against the asphalt sharp in the quiet tension. He wanted to assert control, to command obedience, but the narrative had shifted under his feet. The story of this soldier, one he had underestimated, was unfolding right before him. Avery exhaled softly, her calm exterior never breaking, but beneath it, a storm of defiance and pride raged. She had endured fire and blood, and she would endure judgment too. The PT line, the expectations, the morning sun, they were all small compared to the crucible she had survived in another part of the world. And now, here in front of him, she held the undeniable proof. Whitaker's hand twitched slightly at his side. The other soldiers watched, some leaning forward, eager for what would happen next. The tension was palpable, as if the air itself had thickened around them. Avery's eyes met the colonel's, steady and unwavering. "So," she said softly, a hint of steel in her voice, "shall we continue, sir, or is this enough demonstration of endurance for one morning?" A beat of silence stretched across the field. The sun glared down, bright against the metal and asphalt, shadows stretching long behind the soldiers. Whitaker's lips pressed into a thin line. The PT line waited. Every eye was locked on the unfolding drama, every mind alive with anticipation, as the story hung in the balance. No one moved, not even the colonel, and in that frozen moment it became clear, whatever came next would not be ordinary. And then the hum of the bass seemed to deepen, a tension coiling in every chest, as the first whispers of acknowledgement, of respect, of curiosity began to ripple outward. Avery Mills stood firm, her coat unbuttoned, her scar exposed, a living reminder of battles fought in silence. The field was still, the tension thick, and the question hung in the air. What would the colonel do next? Colonel Whitaker stood frozen for a moment, the harsh morning sun catching the sharp angles of his face. He blinked, as if trying to erase the image before him, but the scar on Sergeant First Class Avery Mills' chest refused to vanish. It was real, undeniable, and carried with it an unspoken history that no drill or command could ever replicate. The field was quiet except for the faint rustling of uniforms and the distant clatter of boots from soldiers still arriving for PT. A strange energy had replaced the usual rhythm, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and a subtle unease. Whitaker's chest tightened. He had built a career on control, on authority unquestioned and unchallenged. Soldiers respected him because they feared him, but now the dynamic had shifted. He had underestimated her, judged her by a limp, by a morning's performance, without knowing the war she carried beneath her skin. And that judgment, which had felt so natural, now gnawed at him like a splinter. "Mills," he said, his voice low but deliberate, "explain." Avery didn't flinch. She had rehearsed this in the silence of countless nights, in the solitude of training and reflection. Her mind replayed every detail of missions that had tested the limits of human endurance, every firefight that had left scars, every life she had fought to save. "Sir," she began, voice calm yet edged with intensity, "I didn't earn this rank or these scars by hiding from challenges or excuses. I earned them in the field, far from this base, far from safety, under conditions that would have broken most people." The murmurs from the PT line grew louder, a ripple of reaction spreading. Soldiers shifted uneasily, some leaning in to catch every word. The younger recruits had never seen this side of Avery, the stoicism, the controlled fury, the unflinching pride in survival. Whitaker's eyes narrowed, a storm of conflicting emotions crossing his features. Disbelief, irritation, admiration, and something he refused to name. Avery took a deep breath, her gaze steady, unwavering. "This scar," she continued, her hand resting lightly on the jagged line that cut across her chest, "is a reminder of what happens when the line between life and death disappears. When you carry others, lives in your hands, when you make choices in a split second that can't be undone. I survived, sir, and I've come back stronger because of it, not despite it." Whitaker's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to assert control, to demand obedience, to remind her, and everyone watching, of his rank and authority. But the usual tactics faltered. Avery wasn't seeking permission or validation. She was reminding him and the soldiers around her of a truth that didn't need approval. She had lived what they could only imagine. A distant whistle cut through the air, signaling the start of PT, but Avery didn't move. The field felt charged, the rhythm of exercise interrupted by this unspoken confrontation. Whitaker's voice, though quieter now, carried tension. "And you expect me to believe a story like that, Sergeant?" Avery's eyes sharpened. "I don't expect anything, sir. You'll see what I can do today despite what you think. That's all that matters." Whitaker's jaw tightened. He had always believed that toughness was measured in speed, endurance, and obedience. Strength could be seen, quantified, tested in minutes of physical exertion. But here, standing before him, Avery challenged that notion. Her strength was invisible until revealed, not in a timed run, not in push-ups or sit-ups, but in resilience, survival, and unflinching courage. A crowd of soldiers had gathered subtly around them, drawn by the tension, by the spectacle. Eyes followed every movement, every gesture, every blink. Some whispered softly, trying to guess the story behind the scar. Others watched in silence, awe creeping into their expressions. The dynamic on the field had shifted completely, and Whitaker felt the unfamiliar weight of uncertainty. Avery's voice cut through the murmurs, calm but commanding. "You see, sir, war isn't about PT scores or morning routines. It's about facing impossible choices, enduring pain, and moving forward even when every part of you wants to stop. That's what this scar represents, and that's why I'm here today." Whitaker swallowed. His authority demanded a response, but the words seemed inadequate. He had mocked her, questioned her dedication, and now the entire line of soldiers, and more importantly, his own sense of control, stood on the edge of recognition. This woman had survived what he could not imagine, and yet she still bore the discipline and composure expected on a military base. Avery shifted slightly, letting the coat hang open, her posture proud yet measured. Every eye on the field took in the scar, the quiet strength radiating from her stance, the calm authority in her presence. The murmurs intensified, a wave of whispers, some tinged with admiration, others with disbelief. Soldiers who had spent years striving to earn respect now found themselves questioning everything they assumed about courage and resilience. Whitaker's mind raced. How had he missed this? How had he judged her, reduced her to a moment of weakness, without understanding the battles she had fought? His hand twitched as if to say something, but the words failed him. Authority felt fragile in this moment, like a paper wall facing a storm. Avery's gaze didn't waver. "Sir," she said quietly, almost conversationally, "I've faced worse than your mocking. I've faced impossible situations where lives depended on me, where hesitation meant death. This limp, this scar, does not define my capability. I define it every day I show up." A tense silence stretched over the field. The recruits and seasoned soldiers alike held their breath. They had seen discipline, drills, and authority, but rarely had they witnessed such a raw, unspoken display of courage. Every word from Avery carried weight, not just in sound, but in the unyielding truth behind it. Whitaker finally spoke, his voice low, measured, but still edged with frustration. "Mills, you make it very difficult to lead in a conventional way." His tone acknowledged her power, even as he tried to contain his discomfort. He had been trained to command, to control, to break hesitancy, but she had refused to bend under scrutiny. She had refused to conform to his expectations. Avery's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Sir," she replied softly, "sometimes leading isn't about forcing compliance. Sometimes it's about showing what real strength looks like, even if you don't recognize it immediately." The field remained still, as if suspended in time. The morning PT had begun, yet no one moved. All eyes were on Avery and Whitaker, caught in the tension, in the unspoken challenge that had transformed the ordinary drill field into a stage for courage and confrontation. Every soldier could feel the weight of the moment, the sharp contrast between authority and experience, control and resilience. Whitaker exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, as if trying to regain equilibrium. His eyes lingered on her, trying to reconcile the mockery he had aimed at her with the undeniable proof of her strength standing before him. Avery didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her posture, letting the morning sun catch the scar once more, a silent, powerful declaration that her story, her battles, were hers alone to carry and reveal. A low murmur spread through the PT line again, a mixture of awe, respect, and tension. Whitaker's mind churned with the implications. How he had misjudged her, how easily he had underestimated courage, and what this revelation meant for the soldiers watching, for the discipline he had cultivated for years. And in that charged moment, Avery Mills, her scar visible, her strength undeniable, stood firmly in the sunlight, waiting, challenging, and unyielding. The question lingered in the air, thick and electric. What would Whitaker do next? Could he acknowledge her strength without losing face? Or would his ego force another confrontation, more dangerous than before? The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the PT field, but the energy that hung in the air was heavier than heat or humidity. The soldiers, frozen in mid-motion, could barely breathe as they watched Avery Mills stand her ground, her scar exposed, her gaze unwavering. Colonel Whitaker's eyes bore into her, a mixture of disbelief, irritation, and grudging respect simmering beneath the surface. For the first time in his career, he felt the unsettling sensation of being unprepared, not for a mission, not for a drill, but for a truth so raw it refused to bend to his authority. Avery's hand rested lightly on the jagged scar that ran across her chest, a line of pain, survival, and unspoken stories. She had endured firefights that lasted hours, explosions that seared her body, and choices that would haunt anyone who had not lived them. Yet here, on the polished asphalt of Fort Brackett, the battlefield had shifted to one of perception, ego, and stubborn authority. Whitaker's gaze flickered momentarily to the other soldiers, and then back to her, realizing that every set of eyes was now measuring him against her. "Sir," Avery began, her voice calm but resonant, "I don't need your approval. I don't need anyone's approval. I survived where survival wasn't guaranteed, and I continue to serve where service demands courage, real courage, not just compliance with protocol." The murmurs from the line of soldiers rose again, louder this time, a wave of hushed voices vibrating with astonishment and intrigue. Some were whispering stories of their own doubts and fears, comparing their routines to the reality Avery had faced. Others simply stared, unable to process the intensity of what they were witnessing. The base seemed to pause, holding its collective breath in the shadow of a story it had never seen unfold so vividly before. Whitaker's jaw tightened. He had always believed that respect was earned through visible discipline, through timed runs, flawless push-ups, the outward show of commitment. But here was a living challenge to that assumption. Avery's strength wasn't measured in minutes or reps. It was encoded in scars, in endurance, in decisions made under fire. Authority felt fragile beneath the weight of her experience, and for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure how to assert it. Avery's lips pressed into a thin line, sensing the hesitation in him, the shift in the unspoken hierarchy. "Sir, if you want to continue PT," she said quietly, "I will participate, but not because I need to prove myself to you. I'll participate because that's what I do. That's who I am." A young recruit in the back swallowed nervously, glancing between Avery and Whitaker. He had never witnessed anything like this. An officer confronted with the undeniable proof of a subordinate's real-life experience, unfiltered by rank or reputation. The whispers escalated into a subtle hum, soldiers, eyes darting from one figure to the other, absorbing every nuance of the confrontation. Whitaker's hand twitched as he processed the words. His instinct was to regain control, to assert dominance, to remind everyone that he was still the colonel and she was still subordinate. Yet every tactic he considered felt hollow. Words of command, of intimidation, had no weight against the reality that stood before him. She had lived in a world of chaos, of danger, of life-and-death decisions. And yet, she bore it with the same poise expected on the PT field. Avery noticed the shift in him, subtle as it was, and she held her gaze unwavering. She could feel the energy around her, the tension coiling in every chest, every pair of eyes locked on the drama. Soldiers she had trained with for years felt a new sense of awareness, a dawning respect that cut through the routine and discipline of the morning drill. In a single moment, the hierarchy of fear, protocol, and rank had been tested and found incomplete. Then, without warning, the sound of a whistle shattered the suspended silence. It was sharp, high-pitched, an official signal that PT had begun, but the field remained still. Avery's decision had altered the flow of the morning. Soldiers hesitated, unsure whether to start the drill or continue watching. Whitaker barked orders, but they faltered in the chaos of acknowledgement and awe. He realized that the usual rhythm, command, obedience, repetition, had been disrupted irreversibly. Avery exhaled softly, as if releasing a fraction of the tension, and then moved. She stepped to the side, positioning herself at the front of the PT line, not in subservience but in quiet authority. Her movements were deliberate, measured, radiating confidence that had been forged in the crucible of war. Whitaker's eyes narrowed, trying to regain some semblance of control, but every muscle in his body was alert to the reality before him. She was unshakable, not because of rank, but because of survival, resilience, and discipline that transcended the usual measures. The whispers grew louder now, a chorus of acknowledgement. Soldiers exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, some wide-eyed in disbelief. They had witnessed protocol, discipline, and authority countless times, but never raw truth displayed so starkly in front of them. The line had become more than a PT drill. It had become a silent classroom, a lesson in endurance, courage, and the weight of unspoken experiences. Whitaker finally stepped forward, his boots echoing sharply against the asphalt. His voice, though low, carried an edge that demanded attention. "Mills," he said, measured, "if what you've endured is true, then it changes how I see you, how I see this entire line." He paused, weighing his next words, aware that any misstep could unravel his authority entirely. "But understand this," he added, voice hardening. "I still expect you to meet standards. Strength is one thing, discipline is another. You cannot excuse failure because you've survived the past." Avery's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Sir," she replied softly, "discipline is measured in consistency. Strength is measured in survival, and both have value depending on the battlefield you're facing. Today I will meet the standard, because that is what I do. But understand this as well. Don't underestimate the soldier because of what you see in a single moment." The PT line seemed to exhale collectively, the hum of whispers rising and falling, the soldiers now caught between awe, fear, and anticipation. The sun glinted off the metal of rifles and badges, casting a harsh glow on every face. Whitaker's gaze lingered on Avery, trying to reconcile authority with acknowledgement, ego with humility. He had underestimated her, and he knew it. Avery shifted slightly, letting the coat hang open again, the scar catching the sunlight. It wasn't a challenge anymore. It was a reminder, a proof, a declaration. Every soldier on the field understood, even if subconsciously, that they were witnessing more than a routine confrontation. They were witnessing courage, unflinching honesty, and the silent power of lived experience. Whitaker's lips pressed into a thin line, the tension in his body coiling like a spring. He had a choice: enforce his authority in the usual way and risk alienating every soldier on the line, or acknowledge the truth standing in front of him and redefine what leadership meant in that moment. And in that tense, suspended heartbeat, Avery Mills waited, poised, silent yet commanding, letting the field, the colonel, and every pair of eyes around her absorb the truth. Strength is not always measured in the moments others see, but in the scars and survival they cannot imagine. The morning heat pressed down on Fort Brackett, mingling with the tension that now crackled across the PT field. Soldiers who had arrived expecting a routine drill now felt the weight of something far more potent, a confrontation between authority and unshakable experience. Every booted foot seemed to echo differently, every inhale heavier, as though the air itself had thickened under the scrutiny of Colonel Whitaker and Sergeant First Class Avery Mills. Whitaker's hands flexed at his sides, the fine line between pride and frustration crossing his face. He had underestimated her. He had mocked what he perceived as weakness, assuming a limp and an injury excuse were mere acts of avoidance. Yet now, standing in the stark sunlight, he realized he was staring at the embodiment of resilience, calm, composed, and silently powerful. Every soldier's eyes followed him, waiting to see if he would break, or if he would assert control and attempt to reclaim authority in the face of undeniable truth. Avery's chest rose and fell steadily. Her scar, now fully exposed to the PT line, was not just a mark of survival. It was a testament to months of deployment, firefights in the desert, missions that had tested her body and mind beyond what many could imagine. She didn't flinch under Whitaker's gaze. In fact, she drew strength from it, letting the tension between them become a tangible force that crackled across the asphalt. The younger soldiers whispered, wide-eyed, while seasoned veterans exchanged glances of quiet acknowledgement. Even in the harsh, regimented environment of military discipline, there was something they recognized. Avery's experience carried weight no routine test could measure. Whitaker, aware of the scrutiny from his entire company, felt the shifting balance of respect and authority pressing against him. "Very well, Mills," he said finally, voice tight but deliberate. "If you're going to participate, you'll do so under the full standard of PT. No shortcuts, no exceptions." His words were sharp, but his posture betrayed unease. He was aware that his next move could define how the entire line perceived him. If he overplayed his authority, he risked alienating every soldier present. If he hesitated, he risked seeming weak. Either choice was fraught with consequence. Avery inclined her head slightly, accepting the challenge without hesitation. "Understood, sir," she replied. Her voice carried a calm authority, not a question or defiance, but a statement of fact. Every muscle in her body was ready, every instinct tuned from months in environments where hesitation could mean death. The field, previously ordinary, now seemed to pulse with anticipation. Whitaker blew a sharp whistle, signaling the start of the drill. Soldiers surged into motion, running laps, performing push-ups, and executing stretches with mechanical precision. Yet Avery's presence altered everything. She moved with a calculated rhythm, not faster than necessary, not slower than discipline demanded. Each step, each motion, carried the weight of experience, subtle, controlled, yet undeniably potent. Soldiers noticed. Eyes flicked toward her, noting her stamina, her measured pace, her composure. Some whispered, others simply watched in awe. The colonel barked orders, attempting to restore the regimented pace, but it was clear he now faced a new problem. Avery's strength wasn't just physical, it was psychological, moral, and undeniable. She set the tone for the field without a word, forcing him to reckon with the reality of what leadership meant when authority alone was insufficient. Then came the first real test. A series of obstacles had been set up for the day's drill: low walls, balance beams, and climbing ropes. Soldiers hesitated at each challenge, counting steps and measuring distance with fear and fatigue gnawing at their muscles. Avery approached the first obstacle, the low wall, with calm determination. Her hands gripped the rough surface, her scar reminding her of past battles, and in a smooth motion she vaulted over it, landing softly on the other side. No hesitation, only precise, controlled execution. The soldiers watching instinctively drew in their breath. They had seen drills countless times, but they had never seen someone move with such quiet authority, such seamless efficiency born of experience rather than repetition. Even Whitaker felt the pull, the subtle challenge of her presence. Authority and rank had rules, yes, but lived experience carried its own weight, and Avery wielded it effortlessly. Next came the balance beam. Soldiers approached it cautiously, some faltering as they adjusted their steps. Avery moved deliberately, her core steady, her focus absolute. Each footfall was precise, controlled, yet unhurried, the culmination of countless hours spent navigating uncertain terrain under the harshest conditions imaginable. Her hands extended slightly for balance, though she didn't need them. She crossed the beam flawlessly, her eyes scanning the line of soldiers as if silently teaching them that composure under pressure was more important than speed. A whisper ran through the crowd, "She's unstoppable." Whitaker's jaw tightened. He had always believed that authority could bend people into shape with orders and discipline, yet here was a subordinate whose strength, quiet, unassuming, and real, forced even him to reckon with his assumptions. He barked another order, but it lacked the usual bite, the edge of certainty. He was aware, perhaps for the first time in his career, that he was not in full control. Avery approached the climbing rope, the final obstacle. The soldiers paused, muscles burning, adrenaline surging, yet she didn't hesitate. Her arms wrapped around the rope, and she ascended with deliberate power, each pull calibrated, each movement precise. The scar across her chest tensed beneath the strain, a visible reminder of past wounds, but she ignored the pain, focusing entirely on the task at hand. As she reached the top, she paused, chest heaving, and looked down at the assembled soldiers. "Strength isn't just what you show on the ground," she said quietly, voice carrying across the field. "It's endurance, it's resilience, it's the ability to move forward when everything inside you screams to stop." The words sank into the soldiers like a stone dropped into still water. Even Whitaker felt the impact, the undeniable truth of her statement. Authority had its place, but courage, experience, and unyielding resilience had power of their own. Then came the murmur of concern. One of the younger soldiers had stumbled at the balance beam, twisting an ankle and falling to the asphalt. Instinctively, Avery was at his side in a heartbeat, assessing the injury, giving calm instructions, guiding him to safety. Her hands were steady, her voice authoritative yet compassionate, and in that moment, every soldier on the field recognized that true leadership was measured not only in physical performance but in care, control, and courage under pressure. Whitaker's gaze lingered on her, conflicted and uncertain. He had mocked her earlier, assumed weakness, and now every eye in the company was measuring him against her, questioning his authority, recognizing hers. The PT field had transformed into a proving ground not just for physical fitness, but for character, courage, and the invisible scars that shaped real soldiers. Avery helped the young recruit back to his feet, adjusting his posture and checking his balance. The soldiers around them watched in a mixture of awe and newfound respect. The lesson was clear: strength is not always visible. Courage is not always loud. True leadership is earned in moments of truth, not by authority alone. And in that charged silence, Whitaker finally spoke, his voice measured, though tinged with reluctant respect. "Mills, you may have changed the way this entire line sees strength." Avery's eyes met his, unwavering, calm, and quietly triumphant. She didn't reply immediately. She simply nodded, letting her actions, her presence, and the visible scar that told a story of survival speak louder than words ever could. But even as she stood there, poised and commanding, a subtle tension lingered in the air. The drill was not over. The soldiers were not done watching. And somewhere deep inside, Whitaker knew that this morning, this confrontation had shifted something fundamental, something powerful, something that could not be undone. And just as the soldiers began to exhale, a sudden, sharp alarm split the morning air, cutting through the field with a shrill intensity that sent a jolt of fear and adrenaline coursing through every body. The shrill alarm ripped through Fort Brackett, cutting through the tense quiet of the PT field like a warning flare. Soldiers froze mid-stride, eyes wide, as the blaring siren bounced off the barracks and asphalt. Avery's instincts kicked in instantly, a muscle memory honed over years in foreign deserts, under sand, smoke, and gunfire. She didn't hesitate. Where others panicked or faltered, she moved with precision, assessing the situation even before the colonel could bark orders. Whitaker's mouth opened to give commands, but Avery's eyes met his, sharp and unflinching. She could see the tension coiling in him, the sudden uncertainty in the man who had moments ago questioned her strength. Without a word, she pointed toward the source of the alarm, the base's supply warehouse, thick with smoke curling into the morning sky. Flames licked the edges of the metal siding, and the smell of burning chemicals hit the field like a punch. "Form teams," she shouted, her voice cutting over the blare of the siren. "Evacuate the perimeter, check the storage logs, and contain what you can before it spreads." Soldiers sprang into motion, following her lead with a speed born of fear and respect. Whitaker barked orders, trying to regain authority, but he was one step behind, realizing she had already assumed command. Avery sprinted toward the warehouse, boots pounding asphalt, scanning the perimeter with trained precision. Smoke stung her eyes, but she didn't falter. Every step carried the weight of countless missions, every movement precise, deliberate. She barked instructions to two soldiers attempting to drag a supply crate away from the flames. "Lower it carefully, don't injure yourselves." Her voice was firm, commanding, yet calm, an anchor in chaos. Whitaker followed reluctantly, his chest tight, adrenaline surging. He had underestimated her earlier, and now, as the fire raged and the soldiers looked to her for direction, he realized just how badly. Avery didn't just manage the chaos, she orchestrated it. Each soldier moved with clarity, guided by her calm authority, responding to her presence rather than the colonel's commands. Inside the warehouse, the heat was oppressive, the fire crackling like a living thing. Avery ducked under a falling beam, her hands steady, directing two soldiers to move volatile crates away from the spreading flames. Sparks flew, the metal siding warped, and the smoke thickened. One soldier coughed violently, clutching his throat. Avery grabbed his arm, guiding him to safety, her scar pressing painfully against her chest with every movement. She ignored it, focusing entirely on survival and control. Whitaker barked from the entrance, his voice commanding, but it lacked the weight it usually carried. He tried to assert authority, but it was futile. The soldiers trusted Avery, relied on her experience, moved because she moved first. He felt an uncomfortable surge of respect and fear coiling in his chest. She had transformed the drill field, the PT line, and now this emergency into a stage where her true strength was undeniable. A sudden crash echoed from deeper inside the warehouse. A stack of crates, unstable from the heat, toppled toward a group of soldiers. Avery lunged forward, pulling two recruits out of the path, throwing herself to the side as splinters of wood and metal slammed to the floor. Heat scorched her arm, smoke burned her lungs, but she didn't falter. The soldiers around her froze, wide-eyed, their awe turning into admiration tinged with terror. Whitaker's hands clenched, the metallic tang of smoke filling his nostrils. He realized painfully that he had underestimated not just her strength, but her courage, her instinct, her ability to lead in real danger. He had mocked her earlier, assumed weakness, judged by a limp, and now watched her perform feats of composure, bravery, and skill that few officers could match. Outside, the fire alarm continued its relentless wail. Soldiers were moving crates, forming lines to pass extinguishers, checking for trapped supplies. Avery's voice carried over the chaos, precise and commanding. "Jackson, cover the east corner. Rivera, keep that chemical barrel from tipping. Smith, watch the ceiling, any falling beams, get back immediately." Each order was delivered with clarity, authority, and urgency, cutting through panic like a blade. A young recruit stumbled, coughing violently, panicked, and Avery was instantly at his side. She grabbed his shoulders, steadying him, her voice low but firm. "Focus, breathe, you've got this. Move with me." She guided him to a safer position, never faltering, never pausing. Her hands were steady, her voice a lifeline, and her scar, a reminder of all she had survived, seemed to thrum with the intensity of the moment. Whitaker finally moved closer, his own boots pounding against asphalt, but he followed her lead rather than directing. He barked orders, but they lacked the resonance they needed, because the soldiers already had a leader in Avery. He could only watch, adjusting to the reality that she had eclipsed his authority through courage, experience, and raw skill. Then came the first real threat. A crate of volatile materials teetered precariously near the flames, smoke and sparks rising ominously. Avery didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward it, calculating the angle, the weight, the timing. She grabbed the crate, maneuvering it carefully, directing nearby soldiers to stabilize it. A sudden flare-up singed her arm and she winced, but didn't stop. Every motion was deliberate, precise, controlled. A ballet of survival born of combat instincts honed over years. The soldiers around her watched in disbelief, some shouting instructions over her, some frozen, unsure how to move in such chaos. But Avery remained calm, authoritative, guiding them with confidence, commanding respect without demanding it. Whitaker, for the first time, felt like an observer, witnessing a subordinate lead with a mastery he had never anticipated. A loud crash echoed from the back of the warehouse. A support beam had given way, sending debris crashing toward another group of recruits. Avery spun, sprinting toward the danger, and shoved two soldiers out of the way just as the beam smashed to the floor. Dust and smoke filled the air, the heat oppressive, yet she moved again, her movements fluid, instinctive, lethal in precision but protective in purpose. For a moment the entire field seemed suspended in time, every eye locked on her, every breath held, every heartbeat synchronized to her actions. She had transformed fear into focus, panic into precision. And in that suspended moment, Whitaker understood a truth he could no longer ignore. Avery Mills wasn't just a soldier. She was the embodiment of courage, endurance, and leadership in its purest form. Then, as the smoke began to clear slightly, Avery barked a final instruction. "Team, evacuate the remaining crates. Jackson, Rivera, cover the exits. Smith, keep an eye on the ceiling. Let's get this under control." Soldiers surged forward with renewed energy, following her lead with a single-minded focus that could only come from trust earned in the crucible of real danger. Whitaker stepped back, exhaling sharply, sweat and smoke mingling on his face. He had underestimated her. He had mocked what he thought was weakness, and now every soldier watching knew the truth. Avery Mills had the courage, skill, and authority to command in a crisis no rank alone could dictate. And as the fire continued to crackle and smoke rose like a dark, twisting pillar into the morning sky, Avery's gaze met Whitaker's. No words were needed. In that look, he understood everything: her strength, her resilience, her scar, and the lesson he would never forget. Never underestimate the soldier who has survived what you cannot imagine. Yet even as she helped the final soldiers secure the perimeter, a subtle tension lingered. The fire was not fully contained, the building unstable, and the alarm's wail a constant reminder that danger still loomed. Another unexpected hazard could emerge at any moment, and Avery would have to respond with the same precision, calm, and authority, or risk disaster. The soldiers watched, breathless, as Avery Mills, scar visible, unflinching, unstoppable, prepared to confront whatever came next. And in that moment the question on everyone's mind hung in the smoky air. What could possibly challenge her now? Smoke churned thick and black over the warehouse, curling into the early morning sky like a warning signal. The heat from the fire pressed against the soldiers' skin, and even the hardened veterans felt their lungs strain as the acrid tang burned. Avery Mills stood at the forefront, her uniform darkened with soot, her hair plastered to her face, and the jagged scar across her chest still visible, a reminder of battles fought long before this one. Every inhale carried the memory of past firefights, and every exhale fueled her focus. The warehouse groaned ominously, the metal siding warped by the heat. Sparks rained down like a storm as flames licked higher, threatening to consume the remaining supplies. Soldiers moved cautiously, unsure how to proceed, while Whitaker barked orders from the edge of the chaos. His voice was sharp, but for the first time it lacked the authority it usually carried. Avery had taken command without permission, and now every soldier on the field deferred to her instincts and judgment rather than rank. Avery assessed the situation quickly, eyes scanning the structure for weak points, potential hazards, and the fastest routes for evacuation. Her mind calculated angles, distances, and the distribution of manpower in seconds, instincts honed over years in the desert under fire and in life-or-death scenarios. "Jackson, Rivera, Smith," she shouted, pointing to her team. "We need to stabilize the east side before the roof caves. 2 of you on the beams, the rest moving crates." The soldiers scrambled, their motions jerky at first, but Avery's calm precision brought order out of chaos. She moved toward the east wall, boots crunching over debris, her hands steady despite the heat and the smoke. Sparks sparked against her sleeve, but she didn't flinch. Every soldier in the warehouse was watching, some in awe, others in disbelief. Even Whitaker's usual confidence wavered as he realized the truth he had been forced to accept. Avery Mills was in total control, and she had earned it through more than rank. It was earned in experience, resilience, and an unflinching ability to act under pressure. Suddenly, a beam cracked loudly overhead. Dust and splinters rained down, and a section of the roof began to sag precariously. Avery froze for only a heartbeat, calculating the risk, then sprinted forward, grabbing Jackson and pulling him clear as the beam collapsed behind them. The roar of falling metal and flames ignited a deeper sense of urgency across the warehouse. Soldiers gasped, some stumbling backward, but Avery's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Move, keep it together, follow my lead." Whitaker's heart pounded. He had mocked her earlier for a limp, for a minor injury, for what he believed was weakness. Now every life on the field and every ounce of his authority depended on her judgment. He barked additional commands, but they barely registered. Soldiers were moving instinctively, following her precise directions, trusting her instincts over his. And with every decision, Avery proved herself, balancing speed with caution, authority with care, and experience with resilience. A crackling sound drew her attention. Another stack of crates, teetering dangerously near a storage of flammable chemicals, shifted. Avery didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, grabbing the crate, pulling it out of harm's way just as sparks ignited the edge of the chemical barrels. A small explosion rocked the warehouse, sending debris flying, and she hit the ground hard, the impact jolting pain through her already wounded chest. Her scar burned, sharp and insistent, but she ignored it. There was no time for hesitation. The younger soldiers froze momentarily, their eyes wide with shock. Avery's calm under fire inspired them to move again, to act decisively. She barked instructions, her voice a tether keeping everyone grounded, and they responded. They moved supplies, secured exits, and extinguished smaller flames, each motion a testament to the trust she had earned. Whitaker, standing at the edge of the smoke, could barely form coherent commands. He was witnessing true leadership, one forged in fire, blood, and survival. Then came the real test. A soldier screamed from the back of the warehouse. Avery spun, sprinting toward him as the floor beneath her groaned ominously. The young recruit had been trapped under a fallen beam, his ankle twisted, his face pale with panic. Avery dropped to one knee, assessing the situation in seconds. "Hold still. I've got you," she shouted, gripping the beam with one hand and sliding the recruit out with the other. Her movements were precise, practiced, controlled, the embodiment of experience and courage. Whitaker watched, his chest tight, adrenaline surging in tandem with the danger. He had underestimated her, belittled her, and yet here she was, saving lives with a skill and calm that he could barely comprehend. The soldiers around them followed Avery's lead, forming a human chain to remove debris, moving faster under her silent authority than they ever had under any formal command. The fire roared louder now, smoke thickening to a near-impenetrable haze. Avery assessed the remaining threats, the chemical barrels, unstable beams, and potential collapse points. Her mind raced, but her movements remained deliberate. She barked instructions. "East wall secure, everyone back 5 meters. Jackson, cover the rear. Rivera, check the roof line." Each command cut through the chaos, her voice calm yet commanding. Whitaker felt a strange mix of admiration and unease. The woman he had mocked hours ago had become the center of control, the fulcrum around which the entire situation pivoted. Every soldier deferred to her instincts. Every motion she made was mirrored with precision. And yet, in the midst of the chaos, she never stopped scanning, calculating, adjusting, like a general on the battlefield, orchestrating the movement of dozens with the grace of someone who had survived countless life-or-death encounters. Suddenly, another beam cracked loudly overhead, threatening to collapse the roof entirely. Avery didn't hesitate. She grabbed two soldiers, guiding them to safety in a fluid motion, her own body brushing against debris as sparks flew. Pain lanced through her chest, her scar a fiery reminder of past wounds, but she ignored it. Survival demanded focus, and focus demanded courage beyond physical limits. Whitaker realized something undeniable. She wasn't just leading, she was saving lives. Every instinct, every command, every movement was calibrated to protect, guide, and control in a situation most soldiers would have panicked in. The warehouse was a battlefield, and Avery Mills was its general, calm, precise, and unflinching. As the smoke began to clear slightly, soldiers secured the remaining hazards, stabilized crates, and guided recruits to safety. Avery stood at the center, chest heaving, her scar visible, sweat and soot streaking her face. Whitaker approached, finally able to speak, voice low but edged with respect. "Mills, you've done more than I could have expected. You've changed how this unit sees leadership." Avery met his gaze, calm but fierce, a glint of defiance and pride in her eyes. She didn't speak immediately. The fire still crackled, the alarm still blaring, and every soldier on the field understood the unspoken truth. She had saved lives, commanded authority without rank, and proven her strength beyond measure. But even in the aftermath, tension lingered. The warehouse wasn't fully secure. Sparks still smoldered. Structural damage threatened new dangers. And deep in the minds of every soldier, one question remained. Could anyone or anything truly challenge Avery Mills, the soldier who had survived war, injury, and command with unflinching courage? And as the smoke curled into the morning sky, one final alarm sounded, this one distant, unexpected, and far more ominous, hinting that the danger was far from over. The distant alarm echoed across Fort Brackett, a low, metallic wail that carried far more menace than the fire siren that had dominated the morning. Soldiers who had barely begun to recover from the warehouse blaze froze again, panic threading through their veins. Avery Mills' eyes sharpened, instantly analyzing the new threat. She didn't flinch, her heartbeat was steady, trained through years of combat, missions where hesitation meant death. The scar across her chest throbbed painfully, a reminder of wounds survived and battles fought, yet she ignored it. Right now, every second counted. Colonel Whitaker's face was taut with tension, his authority fractured by the morning's events. For hours he had tried to assert dominance, only to watch his soldiers defer to Avery's instinct, her calm precision, her unshakable confidence. Now, the distant alarm reminded him that danger didn't wait for ego, and the base was far from safe. He barked orders, but even he sensed that Avery was the center of command now, whether he liked it or not. Avery pivoted, scanning the horizon from the edge of the burned warehouse. A plume of smoke rose from the far end of the base, near the vehicle hangars. She motioned sharply to a squad forming up near the perimeter. "Movement near the hangars. I need a perimeter now. Check the vehicles, secure the exits, and report any breaches immediately." Her voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of authority that demanded compliance. Soldiers obeyed instinctively, eyes wide with trust and awe. Whitaker followed, trying to keep pace. His voice joined hers, barking instructions, but it was clear that the soldiers were listening first to Avery, their movements synchronized to her orders. He felt a pang of unease mixed with admiration. She was unflinching under pressure, making split-second decisions that saved lives and minimized chaos. He had mocked her earlier, dismissed her strength, and now she had become the linchpin of control, the pivot on which the base's safety depended. Avery sprinted toward the hangars, boots slapping asphalt. Smoke stung her eyes, her lungs burned, but she moved with precision, directing soldiers to cover angles and check vehicles. Sparks from the warehouse fire drifted on the wind, adding a surreal haze to the morning chaos. She barked orders to a group of younger recruits fumbling with gear. Focus. Check the doors, check the engines, secure the area. Keep moving. Do not stop. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the edge of the hangars. Avery froze for a heartbeat, calculating the threat. She recognized the signs of someone attempting to breach the perimeter, quick, deliberate movements, staying in the shadows. Without hesitation, she signaled 2 soldiers to flank the figure while she approached the center, keeping them visible and under control. Her body moved instinctively, every step a calculation in survival, command, and protection. Whitaker's chest tightened. He realized the challenge was no longer about authority. It was about action, courage, and life-and-death decisions. He barked instructions, but the soldiers instinctively deferred to Avery's positioning, following her lead without hesitation. The dynamic had shifted entirely. The colonel was a spectator in a situation Avery had mastered before his orders even landed. The shadowed figure emerged, sprinting toward the vehicles. Avery's instincts kicked in. She shouted, "Stop! Move no further!" 2 soldiers blocked the path, rifles raised, but the figure didn't halt. A tense moment stretched across the asphalt like a drawn wire. Avery's hand moved to her side, signaling a restraint protocol. Her voice remained calm but authoritative. "Halt, or force will be used." The figure skidded to a stop, revealing a young civilian worker, sweating and panicked, carrying a faulty fuel canister. Relief and tension collided in Avery's chest. She realized the danger wasn't a deliberate attack. It was an accident, a human error under pressure, amplified by the chaos of the morning. She quickly de-escalated, motioning for the soldiers to lower their weapons. "It's all right. Bring it here carefully. I'll handle it," she said, moving toward the canister. Whitaker exhaled slowly, tension easing slightly. Yet even as the immediate threat dissipated, the adrenaline lingered. Avery's leadership had averted disaster, saved lives, and maintained order, all while under intense physical strain and smoke-choked conditions. Her scar glinted in the morning sun, a visible testament to the battles she had survived before today's chaos. Every soldier watching understood, in silent awe, that she had earned her authority in ways far beyond rank or protocol. But the reprieve was fleeting. A sudden metallic screech echoed from the far edge of the hangars, a structural warning from a damaged roof compromised by the fire. Avery's gaze snapped upward. Sparks and debris began falling in a dangerous cascade. She didn't hesitate. "Evacuate immediately. All personnel back 10 meters. Cover the sides," she ordered, her voice slicing through the chaos. Soldiers scrambled, some stumbling, some coughing from the smoke, but Avery moved with them, guiding, correcting, and protecting. Whitaker followed at a distance, shouting instructions but deferring instinctively to her decisions. The base was a scene of controlled panic, with Avery at the center, orchestrating life-saving movements with calm authority. A young recruit slipped near a burning crate, twisting his ankle. Avery darted to him, lifting him to his feet despite the searing pain in her chest. She ignored her own discomfort, focusing entirely on those around her. "Keep moving. You can do this," she encouraged, her voice carrying both authority and reassurance. Soldiers followed her lead, gaining confidence from her unwavering presence. As the sun climbed higher, the smoke began to thin slightly, revealing the extent of the damage. Flames had consumed portions of the warehouse, singed the hangar roofs, and left debris scattered across the asphalt. Yet Avery stood at the center of it all, scanning the perimeter, adjusting positions, calculating risks. Every decision she made was precise, measured, and instantly acted upon by the soldiers around her. She had become more than a leader. She was a force of order in chaos, a linchpin holding the morning's disaster together. Whitaker approached, cautious but compelled. "Mills," he said, voice low but edged with respect, "you've done more than I could have imagined today. You've saved lives, prevented disaster, and led this entire field without hesitation." His words were grudging, tinged with humility. Avery's eyes met his, unwavering. She nodded slightly but didn't speak. Her focus remained on the perimeter, on the soldiers, on ensuring that every hazard was neutralized. She had led the field through chaos, yet she knew the morning's trials weren't over. Danger could strike again at any moment and she would be ready, her body, mind, and experience honed to respond without pause. And in that charged silence, Whitaker realized the truth he had long resisted. Avery Mills, scarred, resilient, and unflinching, had redefined leadership in ways he could no longer ignore. His authority was intact only because she allowed it. Her skill, courage, and precision had dominated the field, transforming panic into control, fear into action, and chaos into order. But even as the soldiers exhaled, relieved for the first time in hours, the distant sound of sirens, a low, ominous hum this time, warned that the threat was far from over. A new danger, unseen and unpredictable, was approaching, and Avery would have to face it head-on. The calm before the storm was gone. The distant siren that had sounded earlier was now joined by another, a deeper, more urgent alarm that echoed across Fort Brackett. It was impossible to ignore, carrying a sense of inevitability that sent a shiver through even the most seasoned soldiers. Avery Mills' eyes narrowed. Every instinct in her body screamed that this wasn't routine. The morning's fire had been only a prelude. Something larger, more unpredictable was coming, and it would demand every ounce of skill, courage, and leadership she possessed. Whitaker followed closely behind, trying to process the chaos. His chest burned from exertion, but more so from awe. Avery had saved lives, taken control under fire, and earned the unspoken trust of every soldier on the base. His own authority had been challenged, and in some ways reshaped, by her calm decisiveness and raw experience. He had underestimated her, but now he couldn't. Not when the alarm sounded again, this time echoing across the perimeter, signaling an imminent threat at the base's outer fence line. Avery sprinted toward the command post, eyes scanning for incoming reports. "Status," she barked. Her voice carried clarity, calm authority, and the urgency of someone who had faced life-and-death situations countless times before. Soldiers relayed information rapidly. A breach. An unknown vehicle had forced its way through the perimeter fence, approaching the hangars where emergency operations were still underway. Whitaker's hand clenched at his side. He had always trained for threats, for drills, for organized chaos, but nothing had prepared him for Avery Mills, commanding in real time, orchestrating life-saving movements with precision that defied expectation. She turned to him, eyes sharp. "We secure the civilians first. Then we intercept the vehicle, split teams east and west flanks. Move." Soldiers surged into action under her direction. Avery sprinted to the east flank, boots pounding asphalt, smoke from the earlier fire trailing behind her. Sparks from the burned warehouse still drifted in the air, adding a surreal haze to the battlefield. The young recruits moved hesitantly at first, but Avery's presence and authority galvanized them. Her scarred chest, sweat-drenched uniform, and steady gaze became a symbol of unflinching courage. The unknown vehicle approached, tires crunching against gravel, its driver unaware of the organized resistance forming ahead. Avery's mind raced. Every second counted. She calculated angles, distances, and the fastest interception strategy. She barked instructions to two soldiers positioned ahead. "Cut them off at the north access road. I'll cover the west flank." Whitaker followed, aware that his commands were secondary. Avery's instincts were in full control. The soldiers trusted her implicitly, and he couldn't deny it. They moved with coordinated precision, blocking potential escape routes, securing civilians, and readying themselves for confrontation. The vehicle screeched to a halt as it came upon the first blockade. Its driver panicked, trying to maneuver through debris from the morning fire. Avery moved forward, assessing every angle, positioning herself where she could command the field and minimize risk. She barked instructions for the soldiers to intercept, her voice calm but cutting through the chaos like steel. Then it happened, a sudden flare of aggression. The vehicle attempted to push past the perimeter fence, sparking a violent confrontation. Avery's instincts took over. She leapt into action, directing soldiers to immobilize the vehicle's path while staying clear of danger. Her hands moved decisively, signaling movements, her voice both commanding and precise. The soldiers obeyed without hesitation, guided entirely by her decisions. Whitaker observed, chest tight, knowing he could not replicate the calm precision Avery displayed. She was unflinching, agile, and decisive. Her past experiences, the firefights, missions, and injuries that had left her scarred, had prepared her for this moment. She had survived life-threatening situations before, and now she was saving lives in a different kind of battlefield. The vehicle stalled, its driver trapped by the soldiers' strategic positioning. Avery approached, signaling 2 soldiers to flank safely. She kept a safe distance, her eyes locked on the driver. "Step out, slowly," she commanded, voice unwavering. Every movement was calculated. Her presence alone radiated authority and control. The driver hesitated, panic evident in his eyes. Avery's gaze softened only slightly, not losing the intensity necessary for compliance. "You will cooperate, now. This ends peacefully or you risk unnecessary harm. Understand?" The driver nodded, slowly exiting the vehicle. Avery's team moved to secure him, and the threat dissipated without injury. Whitaker finally exhaled, his chest heaving. He approached Avery, now standing tall amidst the chaos, sweat-streaked, scar exposed, commanding the respect of every soldier around her. "Mills," he said quietly, almost reverently, "you've saved the base, the personnel, and everyone's lives today. I underestimated you." He paused, swallowing. "I see now that leadership isn't just about rank. It's about courage, presence, and unflinching action." Avery met his gaze steadily, calm but fierce. "Sir," she said, voice low and steady, "leadership is earned in the field in moments like this. Rank alone doesn't protect anyone. Courage does, precision does, awareness does, and experience is invaluable." She turned, scanning the perimeter, ensuring the situation was fully under control. The soldiers around them were silent, exhausted, but their expressions spoke volumes. They had witnessed true leadership, unshakable courage, and real heroism. Whispers of awe spread among the ranks. Avery Mills had not only survived her own past battles but had translated that survival into the protection of others. Her actions had redefined the morning, the drill, and the expectations of everyone present. Whitaker stepped closer, placing a hand on Avery's shoulder, a rare gesture of acknowledgement and respect. "You've earned the respect of this unit today, and mine." Avery nodded, silent, letting the moment linger without words. The smoke began to dissipate, the alarm subsided, and the sun shone through, illuminating the field, the warehouse, and the soldiers who had endured the chaos. Avery exhaled, exhaustion mixing with relief. Her chest burned, her scar a persistent reminder of the price she had already paid in her life, yet she remained steadfast, focused, and vigilant. Whitaker observed, humbled, understanding that some lessons about leadership, courage, and resilience could not be taught in a classroom or by authority alone. They had to be lived. As soldiers began securing the area, moving debris, and tending to minor injuries, Avery finally allowed herself a moment to look around. The chaos of the morning had been contained. Lives had been saved. Authority had been redefined. And she had proven once again that true strength wasn't measured by appearances, rank, or accolades. It was measured by action, courage, and the unflinching will to survive and protect others. The morning's trials had forged a new understanding across the base. Whitaker, soldiers, and civilians alike had witnessed something extraordinary. Avery Mills had survived combat, injury, and skepticism, and in doing so, she had elevated everyone around her. Her scar was no longer just a mark of pain. It was a symbol of strength, courage, and undeniable authority. And as the sun rose fully over Fort Brackett, casting long golden shadows across the field, the soldiers moved forward, changed, inspired, and aware that they had witnessed real heroism. Avery Mills remained at the center, vigilant, resolute, and unshakable, a living testament to the power of courage, resilience, and leadership earned in the crucible of life itself. The base was safe, for now, but every eye knew this. Avery Mills, scarred yet unbroken, had changed everything. And anyone who underestimated her ever again would learn that courage, experience, and unflinching resolve were forces far stronger than rank or protocol.